So as Albert said, I am going to present a little bit about herbicide label, how to read it, mainly about the safety and knowledge that you can find on that label, and then end up by talking about calibrating and using a sprayer. So Albert showed some really good pictures of all the different herbicides and talked about, you know, what was in them, what you can use each one for. This is what kind of gets me, is that sometimes you have different brand name, but it's the same herbicide. So the ones on the left here are both glyphosate, but you know, they come from a different company, so they have different name. Another example is 2,4-D. Sometimes you'll see the name really big across the jug and sometimes not, but it's sold by a different company. So the jug looks different, but it has the same herbicide in there. The other thing that happens is you have the same brand name, and that's Albert showed a lot of those. Very interesting. But there's different concentrations of the active ingredient. So this is Roundup Pro concentration, a high one, and that's actually what growers use and what you can use when you know how to mix the right amount. Here's something called Roundup Weed and Grass Killer, and a lower concentration, but it's still the glyphosate. And then the last one here is Roundup Extended Control. This is in what's called a ready to use, or RTU, jug, and that means it's ready to go. All you have to do is unhook and spread out the little nozzle and hand held nozzle, and you can go around and just spray that, because they've mixed it up you know, the way that you would do when you mix it yourself. Except you might notice the percentage down there is a lot lower, and I'll show you how that percentage might not be enough for what you need to do to control weeds. The advantage, of course, is it's all ready to go. So, see, let me make sure I can see here. So this is a label. This happens to be Bastagran, a herbicide that's used in a lot of different crops. But before I get into the label, I want to let you know just some really quick information about, you know, how does this chemical get from the laboratory out there for everybody to use? And we call it lab to label. Well, that actually entails 10 or even more years by the company, and you know, $2 or $3 million or even more over those 10 years. The EPA requirements are pretty stringent, because their goal is to really ensure that the product is used legally and that they protect health and the environment. And to ensure that a pesticide will not present any health or environmental concerns, these compounds are subjected to more than 120 different types of tests and multiple times. And those tests, you know, the 120 that I'm talking about are effect on the environment, how it moves, how it dissipates, and also effect on what would eventually be humans, so that the allowable amount that is allowed out there to be used, it has a safety factor of, you know, 10 to 100 times what they saw in the laboratory, that would have even minuscule damage to anything that they're using. And people like us, Albert and Tim and Steve and all of us great weed scientists down here, we're conducting our field studies at the same time for evaluations, so that we can figure out the right rates to use. And so all this information goes into a package that's submitted to EPA, and then they can either approve it or not approve it. And I used to work for a chemical company, and we've had pesticides that were not approved even after 10 years of use for one reason or the other. Go back to here. So on a label, there's a lot of different things that are in the label. But up front, it's usually the same. It is the same thing, and it's usually in the same format. When you get past all of this, different companies have different ways that they set up their labels. So that gets kind of interesting, and you have to really look. It could be different for different labels. But the first big thing after you see the active ingredient, which is bentazone, you'll see a signal word, and this one happens to have a caution or a caution word. There's other signal words like now I can't think of them, but I'll tell you a little bit later. The next thing you'll see is first aid, and also there's a hotline number in case something happens. As we go on down the label, you'll see precautionary statements, hazard to humans and domestic animals. And then one of the most important things for you, as somebody that goes out with these kinds of smaller sprayers, is personal protective equipment, or PPE, you'll hear it called. And that's actually what you wear, what you need to wear when you're out using this product. So in this particular one, it recommends long sleeve shirt and pants, waterproof gloves, and shoes plus socks. And I definitely would make those shoes closed and shoes, not like open sandals or flip-flops or anything like that. So that's important, and that's an important area of the label to pay attention to. You also will see other safety recommendations. One of those is environmental hazards, and that section will tell you, don't apply it directly to water, or it'll give buffer zones and things like that. And we get to directions for use. And Albert said this, the label is the law. This is a federal product and federally approved product. So what you see in this label is the law. And the sales and warranty, are covered by the company. Again, there's a section called agricultural use requirements, and it talks about protective PPE and worker protection standard when this is being used commercially. And for that section, it talks about coveralls, again, waterproof gloves, and shoes plus socks. But no matter what you're spraying, I recommend long sleeve, and don't be wearing shorts, and like I said, closed shoes, not open sandals, and gloves, just because you don't want to get it's kind of messy and sticky sometimes. And you can wear safety glasses, that's great, and a hat. You can even go as far as a respirator, but the herbicides that we use, except for one, which is paraquat, really don't have that in the PPE sections. So then we have the storage and disposal section. What you do, with that jug when you first get it, and when you have used it, but it's not fully used, you still have product in the jug. And then it also talks about how to dispose those containers when you're done. And I've highlighted here triple rinse containers and triple rinse containers, and we'll talk about triple rinsing your sprayer as well. That means when you're washing it out, you want to wash it out 3 times with water, or you might even can buy a tank cleaner, or use some soap that doesn't foam up too much, and that will clean out the container. And then on the label, it'll tell you what you can do with that container. And there's Department of Ag in different states have times, and they make this available, the time they advertise it, when they can come around and take your empty containers, and they would do the disposal. You don't want to just throw them out in the driveway or out in the field. So again, in case of emergency, it has numbers to call. Local doctor tells you to call your local doctor and whatnot. And then it will also have steps to be taken in case something's released or spilled. A lot of good information there in that paragraph, but be looking for that on the label. And we get into some general information, what Albert was talking about, the way that the herbicide works. And again, we see some cleaning spray equipment, and we're getting to application instructions. Important things to understand, and this general information section might be hard for you to see, but you definitely need to look for it, and it comes after a lot of the safety information. So again, on the labels, and this is usually at the end of a label, gives you a lot of information in case there's an emergency, what to do, steps to take. And then also, again, on these labels, usually towards the end, we'll talk about how to store the containers, how to dispose of the containers. And then it can give you phone numbers for, 24-hour emergency assistance for, spilling or leaking, or even if there's a fire somehow where you have the product. So that label has a lot of information about safety, but you can finally get to the part in the label where you can find out what weeds that particular herbicide controls. And Albert went over that really well. You know what kind of herbicide it is, how it does work, and you'll get a list of the weeds. And you can see that these are mostly broadleaves, and even some that are perennial, or live more than 1 year. And it can give you mixing directions and talk about tank mixtures as Albert said. And then you'll find charts where it'll give you specific rates for specific weeds, and those rates are usually in the rate per acre, okay? And that's an important thing to remember when you're using small equipment, as I'll explain here in a little bit. So you see the label, a lot of safety information, which is great, and that's usually right up front in the label after you know what active ingredient is there. And then as you go through the label, you'll see weeds controlled. And in a lot of agricultural products, they'll list out the crops separately because there might be different rates used in different crops, and it's important to know for your crop. There's a really nice an extension bulletin, University of Idaho Extension Bulletin number 908. And Rhonda Hernick shared this with me. She's our pesticide management specialist. She probably has a different name, but she's one of the herbicide, or one of the authors here. And this one really goes through more, than what I've told you about reading and understanding pesticide labels, including why I read the label and that kind of thing. And this will be available, I think, in a package that Doug and some of the other people will be able to post that you'll be able to download.